You say a plane ride in 2016 changed your life. What exactly happened on that plane ride?
It did. So I was actually flying home from Amsterdam back to Philadelphia, where I grew up. I don't live there anymore. Now I'm in New York, but I was flying back to Philadelphia, and like literally halfway over the Atlantic, the plane just all of a sudden had this really, really violent turbulence like issue. And so it was different than any turbulence I've ever been through. I'm glad we're having this conversation today because I just got done flying yesterday. But yeah, it like dropped a few thousand feet really fast, and it hard rolled to the left. And so stuff went everywhere. They had just served coffee, like stuff just flew everywhere. And I think like at that time in my life, I was, I guess, 27. I had graduated from college, gone straight to law school, and then gone to a big law firm, was working in a law firm with thousands of other attorneys. And I hated it, but I very much thought that it was just like destiny, like it had happened to me, and there was nothing I could do about this miserable career. And so sitting there on that plane with it shaking and shit going everywhere, I was like, I have a lot more control than I think I do about some things in life. So I couldn't control the plane, I couldn't control what happened there, but I could control my career path. There was just like something that snapped in my head.
That's funny because, first of all, you're an Indian parent's dream. Like coming from an Indian
Yeah.
family, right? Going to law school, then becoming a lawyer. I mean, my Indian parents would adopt you in a second. But
I'm ready. I'm available.
I spoke to I spoke to Dr. Anne Laura LeCompte, who also came out with a book.
Yes. Yes.
And when I spoke to her, I asked her about when her career changed, and she actually said she thought it was completely unnecessary to leave her job at Google to start her passion of like the newsletter. So I'm interested to see, do you have the same feeling of the commitment that you gave to the switch of the career path? Do you feel the same way that it was necessary or unnecessary?
Oh, I totally agree with her actually, because looking back on it, this is something I write a lot about in my book, that looking back on it, I wish I would have learned how to integrate more, first of all, more joy into my day-to-day life outside of my career. So I think one of the biggest takeaways from me was like not looking to my job or my career, whether it's owning your own business or working in a corporate job like Google. To me now, sitting here this many years later, I'm like, oh, it wasn't my job's job to make me happy. So I wish I would have looked for more joy in my life. But then also looking back on it, I'm like, oh, there was so much opportunity for like creative pursuits that, you know, I could have started a newsletter, for example, and still worked my normal job. But I didn't see it that way at the time. I saw it so black and white, like I have to walk away from this whole thing. Yeah.
It isn't your job's job to make you happy, but yet you saw the career as a big avenue for, was it happiness? What is it?
Yeah, so well, you know, so I write in my book, like, it's not your job's job to make you happy, but it also doesn't need to make you miserable. Like, I think there's a nice in between. And so
Okay.
maybe you can find something that you're like, okay, I feel good about this work, but you can find passion. I think there's just a lot of room for finding passion in your life outside of what you do between the hours of 9 to 5. Like, I think in looking back, if I was to like audit how I was doing when I was working at a big firm at like 23, you know, step into this huge law firm, and I'm like, I didn't have any hobbies. I wasn't hanging out with many of my friends anymore. I mean, you know, after college and law school, you go through this phase of like, you're always around a lot of other people your age. And then all of a sudden you go and you're working. And now I was around mostly, you know, all lawyers pretty much, who primarily were not my age. And so I switched like my whole life to being about being a lawyer, even though I hated being a lawyer. So like looking back on it now, I'm like, that didn't make much sense. I could have cultivated a lot of stuff outside of my career.
Yeah, I recently just transferred my major, and obviously it's not the same thing. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to compare on the same level, but I had to go through a lot of self-reflection as well, whether I'm on the right line in terms of my path. I know it's a very simple sounding question, but the feeling of not liking your job or not liking your path, I feel like is actually a hard question to analyze, right? Because you don't know whether it's outside factors that are causing less joy. You don't know if it's the job itself. What were the key indicators for you that said, I need to get out of being a lawyer?
Yeah, I think it was honestly, I used to say, like, I would look at my boss, who was obviously much older than me at the time, and I would look and be like, oh, I don't want to be him when I grow up. Like, that is a good indication. Because it was like, you're looking at, for being a lawyer, for example, like, the whole goal, the whole purpose is to become a partner. And I'm like sitting there like, okay, so you become a partner and you work more hours and your life is like more miserable. There's no like payoff. I think it's particularly weird for me because my husband is a professor. And so there, you work your butt off to become a professor. He's brilliant like you, right? And so he's brilliant. He went to elite schools. He did all of this stuff. But once he gets tenure, there's like this massive payoff, right? And he can do the research he loves and all of this. And I was like, what is this for me? Like, I become partner and then my life is worse. So that was like one indicator, was that I didn't want the growth opportunities, which I think is probably a bad sign. And I think that the other is that when you try a lot, because to your point, you're right. It's like, you don't know, like I tried a smaller law firm, for example. I thought, okay, maybe it's like I'm in too big of a place. I tried different types of law. I tried different bosses. Like I tried all these different things. And even it was a very Goldilocks kind of situation. I was like, oh, none of these are feeling right to me. So I gave it a go. Like I felt good leaving, in the sense that I'm like, you know what? I tried. It's not like I worked one job and didn't like it. Yeah.
And then you agree with Dr. Anne-Laure LeConf that you don't need to leave the job completely. So in your case, what do you think you should have done? Although obviously I know that, I don't know about you, I believe that we shouldn't really have regrets, because you maybe would not be here where you are if you were doing it on the side then. But in terms of advice that you could provide to someone like me, who's potentially going into the job market in 2 years,
Yeah.
what do you think you would have done differently?
I would put a lot less pressure on the job or the career path, and I would just be, I'm like a huge fan of curiosity. Being curious is my favorite thing, my favorite trait about other people. And I think that looking back on it, because exactly to your point, like I don't actually regret, even though I was super miserable at the time, I don't regret any of those experiences, because they all like layered and built on each other. And also they're all experiences that I draw upon now. So without them, I wouldn't be able to do what I do now. Like I wouldn't be able, I have a legal templates business.
Yeah, of
I
course.
sell downloadable contracts to people who start businesses. I wouldn't have been able to do that if not only had I not been a lawyer, but also in my experience in all of these different law firms. That's kind of what like cultivated and started brewing this idea very early on, when it was still like a seed in my mind about this business. So it's like, I think just giving yourself some grace and some patience to be like, this is all going to go somewhere. You don't have to have the exact path figured out right now.
Yeah, I spoke to Giovanni Vaccaro, who's the founder of Glam Squad, about 2 weeks ago. And he actually spoke about this idea that the biggest wealth in our lives is actually not correlated with our job, but rather what we do with our time.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because I found it really interesting that you said you realized you didn't like your law job for one of the reasons that you didn't have any passions on the side. Like, it's almost like it restricted your time. So is that why you think entrepreneurship provides wealth, because it actually provides time rather than restriction of where you get money still?
Yeah, I think this is where it's really important to know yourself and what's important to you. I'm somebody, this probably sounds crazy, but like, I don't believe that money is the only thing that we should be thinking about. I think it kind of comes with the territory when you're doing something that you love and providing a really good service or offering a good product. But for me, like my currency, my like human currency is time and flexibility. I think that was one of the things that became really apparent to me working in corporate, was that I was like, oh, I hate this. Like I hate being told like where I have to be at a certain time, that I have to sit here until 5 because it just looks good. Or, I hated that. I hated that I couldn't go for a walk at lunch, or people thought I was lazy. I didn't like that feeling of restriction. And so yeah, that was a big selling point to me, of being like, oh, if I could start my own business, then I would have that. I do think that gets romanticized a little bit too much, because in the beginning, I actually worked way more than I was even as a lawyer,
But then obviously the opportunity, like you said, if you became a partner in the firm, you'd have worked more, but then the opportunity of, I guess, being an entrepreneur was you'd work less. Is that what the key factor was?
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, like you can control. I mean, I can kind of control now. Like, I, first of all, could scale my company to what I wanted to theoretically. And also, I can hire out. So, right. So, I can hire people to take certain things off my plate to help me reduce like tasks that do take up a lot of time or things that I'm not as good at or things I just don't need to be doing because it's not a very good thing for the owner of the business to be doing. It's not a revenue generating activity. So, yeah, I think I just have a little bit more control over that now. I also intentionally built my business in a way that I would have the time and the flexibility. So like, for example, I purposefully did not want a service-based business because I didn't want to be the person who was responsible for delivering my product, my service. So I decided to build a digital product business, so essentially an e-commerce business selling digital products because it's super scalable and doesn't require me very much.
Interesting. And obviously, you have a book coming out on April 15th. I've got that right. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And I quite like asking authors that have upcoming. I mean, I say I quite like. I only asked one, so you're my second. But when an upcoming book is coming out, I like to analyze what the author is given, and for me, that is the title. I love analyzing title, and my favorite part about your title is actually surprisingly none of the words. It's that massive question mark at the end. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite thing about your title. When I start my business, I'll be happy. You know what I'm trying to say? And I'm wondering, why is that question mark there? Why is that not a statement?
It was very, very, very intentional, like most things that I do in my business. But the long story behind the title was that my original title was actually future proofed. And then you kind of just like do a placeholder when you get a book deal. Okay. And that was like my placeholder title. We then had the hardest time coming up with a title. And one of the things my publisher recommended was they were like, oh, it's really helpful if you ever have like a phrase, like something you say a lot in your content or to your clients or whatever, like, is there anything you can think of? I was like, well, I always like caution people against when then statements in life in general, or if you're going to start your own business, because a lot of people think like when I start my business, I'll be happy. But I think that there's really more of this upward inflection at the end, like I'll be happy because I think that they're hoping like there's like hope that this business is going to resolve their life or the business is going to resolve all the problems they had when they were working a corporate job, which is a lot of what we've been talking about. Yeah. So that's why it's there.
So if our job or our business is not supposed to provide the happiness in our life, what is the purpose of the business?
Yeah, I think of the purpose of the business as offering a really good product that improves other people's life, or in my case, business, and then therefore their lives. But I always think about like my purpose here is to share like what I'm really good at, which is in my case, distilling kind of overly complicated, boring, stuffy legal topics into something that's really digestible and simple and implementable. And so that's like, if we're going to call that my gift, which I don't like love the phrase, but let's just go with it. So if that's my gift, like I think my purpose is just giving that to other people because it's something that's helpful. And then I get to go out and watch all of I have thousands and thousands and thousands of customers that now I've gotten to see start businesses, grow businesses that go out and help other people. So it's like this really cool ripple effect.
I've noticed actually a weird trend because you just said it, and every big time entrepreneur or big founder of any business that I see, they use the same word. Do you know what word I'm talking about?
Is it ripple effect?
No, it's actually purpose. It's so interesting because so many people advocate what you advocate in terms of successful people that I see. Simon Squibb, who's a multi-million entrepreneur in the UK, does it. I spoke to Giovanni Vaccaro 2 weeks ago. He does it. Even Steve Jobs, when he was making the Apple phone, their big idea isn't actually money orientated. It's always about helping people and helping society in a bigger way.
Well, that's marketing 101, is that people have a problem and then your product solves that problem. So that's like, if you zoom out, if you want to start any kind of business, that is like the number one thing you need to be thinking about is like, what problem do people have? What do they wish that they had instead? What solution do they want? And then how does your product fill that gap? And so it's like, it kind of works for both of us because I'm like, well, I'm solving your problem and I feel like I have purpose because I'm solving your problem. Like, I mean, everyone in life wants to feel like they have a purpose, right? And a connection to something that's, I think, larger than themselves. So that's probably pretty healthy for us. And so I think, yeah, that's probably part of it, is like going out there and solving other people's problems is going to make you feel really useful.
Yeah, and then back to this idea of the question. With that question mark at the end for me indicates that there's a group of people who should start a business, and then there's people who just don't even get near it. Just figure some shit out first. Let's start with the should. I quite like the should. Which people should start a business?
I think people who are up for the adventure, people who are okay with a little bit of risk tolerance. I don't think you have to be super, super risky, but like it's not, as comfortable and cushy. Like people like my husband, for example, he could never do this full time because like the idea of like not knowing how much money you're going to make, not knowing if like there's a downturn in the economy, is it going to impact my business? Like, and I'm not saying that from a good or bad place. I think it's just like knowing yourself. And if that sounds like too much for you, if you don't want to do like a period of hustle, there's a lot of ingenuity and innovation on your part. And like, at the end of the day, it's all on you. Like you have to think of all these things. I've had to self-teach like things like SEO and building my website and e-commerce shops and marketing and social media and copywriting, hiring, like leadership skills, everything I've had to teach myself along the way. If you're like, no, I'm okay with, I have a friend who's like, I just like want to go to work, tell me what to do. And then I go home from work and that's that. And you're receiving a paycheck every 2 weeks or whatever, then like entrepreneurship's not so much for you. So I think if like that sounds exciting to you, that's cool. And I also think if you're somebody who like loves to dream, like I think the coolest part about being an entrepreneur is like dreaming up something and then just seeing like, okay, what can actually come from this? Yeah.
Yeah. I like this idea that you brought up, the 9 to 5s. I've been going through a lot of, I don't even know if the word's research, but a lot of thinking. And on social media especially, which is why I'm trying to limit it, you see so many ideas now that you got to do this, you got to do that. And for me, the current trend is entrepreneurship. Everyone is saying that the 9 to 5 is the biggest trap. You're going to get trapped in there you can't follow your dreams. Part of me is like, yes, there is an element of entrepreneurship which gives you freedom. But then I also feel like 9 to 5s are getting really disparaged.
I think that we need both. Like, this is what makes the world go round. I don't think that I don't think that everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. And I don't think everyone's cut out to work 9 to 5. Like, it's really about knowing yourself. Sometimes you don't know until you try. I mean, it's easy for me to say because this is what I did, but I do think that there was a benefit to having worked in corporate first before doing this, because I got to see on a large scale what a big company that was already established, already up and running was doing. I learned a lot, but you also need time to actually learn your trade, like your skill. And so that's kind of hard to do just throwing yourself. I don't think it's impossible to like go straight into entrepreneurship. Some people do that and they're very successful at it. But I think for me, it was like, I mean, first of all, I had to learn how to become a lawyer first before I started a business about legal stuff,
Yeah, so you said it's not impossible, but you think it's recommended to actually get a touch of corporate experience.
I don't think it's the worst thing. I mean, even if that's like working in a virtual job, working in a startup, like I think there's all kinds of variations. It doesn't have to be that you're in a cubicle in a skyscraper like I was. And so it doesn't have to be that. But there's a lot to be learned. And like, even just being open, this is like what I was talking about earlier about being open to that experience of just being like, hey, I don't know if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, but we don't need to make like entire life decisions right now. Like, let's just get started and see, what do you still have to learn? I mean, I think being humble, I think working in a job also helps to like humble you coming out of college, or if any of you go to grad school, then you're like, you come out thinking you already know everything. And then you go to work and you're like, oh, wow, I actually don't know anything, but I need some time to like, to acclimate, to this career. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, as much as I loved school and I loved, law school in particular, I just thought it was like the best education. I really enjoyed it. I definitely came out of there being like, okay, I know how to be a lawyer. You literally don't know anything, and you have to it's just one of those jobs that's like you can't know until you actually do it. My mom was a physician. My mom didn't go to med school until I was young, so I got to see her go through this in real time. So she was like in her 40s by the time she started working full time as a doctor. And it was the same thing. I mean, you stand there in med school and listen and watch and observe. And it's not until like a patient is bleeding in front of you in the ER that you're like, oh, this is on me, right? Like I have to actually do this. So yeah, I think there's something to getting your hands dirty. Yeah.
I also do think I like to talk about young men in particular because obviously I'm a young man, so it's like I can resonate most with it. And
Yeah.
what I tend to see is that maybe it's a thing for across a generation. Maybe I'm like over niching it down, but I feel like money is a big part of, especially a young man's identity. The ability to provide and create money is being hashed down our throats currently, and I think that's why
Yeah.
people feel so lost. And you advocate that our businesses won't fix our life. That's what I've noticed. So where's the actual root of the contradiction that men have a issue with creating money, but then even if they find a business that can create that money, it actually won't fix their life?
Yeah, I think in all of these scenarios, it's that the issue lies with like putting your worth, your identity, your happiness, whatever, in something that's external to you. And so like it's not going to be like money, it's not going to be buying certain goods like a fancy car or like having a certain house or living in a certain city. None of that is what's going to make us truly happy. I don't think like I mean, not to take like a super Buddhist approach to it, but I just think that like happiness is actually just here. It's like within you. And we spend a lot of time in our life like looking for this thing, like almost like there's going to be like a missing puzzle piece that like makes the whole thing fall into place. But it's just like, oh, I actually already have the puzzle pieces that I need. I don't need to keep going out and looking for it.
What's the happy trap?
Yeah. The happy trap is that you chase this down, right? That you chase down like, oh, if I work in this job, or like, oh, the reason I hate my job is because I don't make enough money. So I had so many friends, for example, coming out of law school where they got, especially like I graduated from law school in 2012. And so there was a huge economic downturn. And so a lot of us took jobs that paid way less than even people who had graduated just the year before us. And everybody was like, oh, I hate this job because I'm just not getting paid enough. So if I just go get a different job that just pays like in the same field that pays me more, I'll be happy. And then it would be like, oh, whoops, that didn't fix it either. So I think this happy trap is like constantly like moving the carrot down the road, thinking if I just change just like one variable, it's going to make me happier.
And what is the main variable that you actually need to address if it's not like the career?
Yeah, I think it's about finding your purpose in life, not to come
It
back
is
to
the
that
purpose.
word.
Yeah.
I do think it is about like your purpose, and I guess that's where I do come back to this like I don't know that your purpose has to be your career. It can be something larger than that. I think doing things outside of ourselves honestly brings some of the best happiness that I can think of. I think like especially in our like two generations, for example, where we've lived our lives on social media or like consuming a lot of social media, I think thinking that like there's just something wrong with us, that we need more, that all these people are doing it better and faster and stronger and whatever, has kind of messed us up. And it's gotten us, it's really, I was just having a conversation with a friend this morning about how it really like mutes the voice, like your own voice, your internal voice of what you really want and what you really want to do in your life, because you're constantly being inundated with like what everybody else is doing. So it's really hard to know what you want.
Yeah, we're mimetic creatures, so we just
Yeah.
kind of mirror others' goals when in reality that might not be our own purpose.
Yeah, it's like, do you really want to do that? I mean, even for anyone who's listening, who's now going down, a similar path to you, where you're about to choose, like, what career do I want to do? What job do I want to do? Even then, I think you have to be really careful, because it's just common that we like go down paths that our parents set for us, that other people set for us, that our peers set for us, like what you see on social media. So it's really easy to do that, but I recommend kind of like checking in with yourself. I write in the book about how like I think this conversation is like so frustrating to me, because one of the things I realized was that I'm like, like life is built backwards. You're supposed to at like 18, you're supposed to choose a major that then like sets your life in motion. Or even like while you're in college, you're choosing something that sets this path for you. And how are you supposed to know now what you want to do? So that is maybe also where some of this like whole, like, I just think it's helpful to get out there and try, because it helps you to chisel down like, oh, I didn't like that so much. I liked this part, but I want a little less that and a little bit more of this. You don't know unless you try it. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, I hate to say it, but I go on LinkedIn, and every single time I see an NYU student or one of my friends like upload, like, I'm happy for them, honestly. Like, I'm not gonna like say that I'm not happy, but every single time I see like I'm pleased to announce that I've just got an internship, I'm like, it's a dagger to my heart, Sam. It's a dagger to my heart.
I bet. I get it.
But we've spoken a lot about the fact that, or the cons of social media, but I think there is actually a big element of social media which you take on really well, which I feel like the landscape of entrepreneurship has never been more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's made it possible to start businesses or to start like passion projects, right? Even there are a lot of people I follow who have full-time jobs, but then like do this really cool content on social media. It's allowed a lot of connection. It's also contributed to a lot of disconnection and loneliness. So it's like a really weird, social has such like just pluses and minuses. Like, I've met so many of my closest friends on there. I've obviously built so much of my business through social media, particularly Instagram. So that was what was most popular when I started it. And so like there's so much positive. I see it as a free marketing tool. I see it as a free networking tool. I kind of like, as a business person, I kind of try to get to, or I am trying to get to, a mindset that's like, use it for what you want to use it for and leave the rest, So I don't need to be there to consume a whole lot. I see it as like a free platform to promote my business and potentially find customers.
You see it as a business platform. I think that's a good mindset.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a business, I think that's helpful. To be totally honest with you, if I did not have this business and I was just a normal person, I would not have. I would encourage myself not to have social media. I don't think it's healthy. I think that the cons of it outweigh. Yeah, I think maybe with, well, first of all, I'm biased in the sense that like I spend an abnormal amount of time on it for my business. And so then I'm just absorbing like way too much. And I'm at this point like so sick of knowing what everybody else thinks about everything. And I also have seen it like destroy some of my individuality. Like I think I've spent the last year or so kind of getting that back. But like I just started noticing like, wow, everybody like dresses the same and eats the same things and goes to the same like over touristed, locations around the world. And like, it's so basic, like it's so boring. And so there was a part of me that just started to be like, how do I want to dress? Where do I want to go? What do I want to eat? And I was sick of everybody else telling me. I mean, it's not like they're telling you, they're not saying like eat only this thing, but they're, by you constantly seeing it all the time, you're just like, oh, that's the workout I should be doing. That's the place I should be traveling. That's the business I should have. Right. Yeah.
That's so funny, because I'm not going to try to do a gotcha here. That's not what I'm trying to do. But you post a lot of really helpful content on your Instagram. Like, with a guy who's probably like got legal knowledge from Harvey Specter on Suits, your stuff is pretty advanced, like in terms of the legal templates. But then, in your perspective, you think if people aren't on there to actually start a business or for business reasons, they shouldn't. You think it's harmful to be on social media when your content's on there? How do we strike a balance when we're getting helpful content and getting rid of the garbage? Is it just like a trade-off where we're on social media and we're getting the good content and then the bad content's going to seep in, and the second one is I'm just going to free from both?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because there is some like hypocrisy here where I would say too, like you're catching me at a weird moment where I'm kind of in the process of contemplating like, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to focus on this so much? I also have a podcast like you. I find that to be like such a better medium in my opinion, because I love the fact that we can have conversations like this and have nuance as well. Because like one of the things that pisses me off the most about social is that there's no nuance, and so like everyone will like say something like spicy, and it's like, wow, it's actually like so much deeper than that. It's not a 7-second clip thing. So I like the fact that like platforms like this, I'm on YouTube as well, like same thing, you can have deeper conversations, more community. So it's a kind of a weird moment for me where I'm trying to figure that out. I do think, I think that there is some self-responsibility here that's always like the underlying part of this conversation is like, it's up to everybody who's on social to consume it in a way that works best for them. And so if that means only following, like, for example, if you're on social because you're thinking about starting a business and so you want to be there to learn and like improve yourself and like improve your mental health, then you better be only following people who are making you feel that way, and you better be cutting all the people who aren't, right?
Yeah.
And then like, I think what's annoying about this though is that it's not in our control. So like platforms like Instagram are showing you people who you didn't elect to follow. So then you're just like, what the heck? I came here to be inspired, and then this person's doing this thing. So that's where I'm just like, oh, it's such a tough balance. Yeah.
No, I like that actually advice, that if you're convincing yourself that you're on social media for like helpful reasons to get content like from people like yourself, then why are you following the rest? Like of the people that you don't need to follow. That's a really good piece of advice.
And also don't mix up like something I see a lot with early entrepreneurs is that they mistake like spending time on social media and doom scrolling with working. So they'll be like, oh, I worked like 6 hours today. I'm like, that does not work. Right. And so like consuming all this content and like, I don't know, lurking and like seeing what everybody else is doing to see what you should be doing. That's not work. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw this crazy stat though, in terms of the founders of big businesses. I don't know what the percentage was 50 years ago, but obviously, it was much less because the digital landscape of 50 years ago was practically non-existent.
Yeah.
The current statistic is that with big founders, I think 95% of their intangible assets are all digital. So it shows, for me, that just shows how important the online landscape is for starting a business. So you're the expert. Now's the time. Let's start with the prep. I like the prep. What are the habits, skills, the techniques that we can learn to prepare to start a business? Or is it actually in the journey?
Yeah. I think there's a lot you can do. So, I mean, I think that the number one skill that was the most helpful, and that I would develop no matter what kind of business you want to start is copywriting, any type of writing. Because copywriting, I mean, even if you don't physically do the writing in your business, like eventually, or even from the start, you need to, like, copywriting teaches you frameworks essentially of how to think about certain things, like even like the framework I mentioned earlier, like the PAS framework of problem, agitate, and solution. And so you like pitch your like you speak to your ideal client as whatever problem that they're having. You agitate it a little bit by going a little deeper, and then you offer up your product as the solution. That's like kind of basic copywriting framework. That also carries over to like how you position your product, how you talk about what you do. So like learning about copywriting. I mean, in today's world, obviously, I think any content creation skills, depending on what you want to do, like learning how to do podcasts, like learning video editing skills, learning photography and video skills, like that stuff is all so helpful. I mean, that's still stuff that I do every single day and I'm trying to get better at every day. So those are all helpful. And I mean, depending on what kind of business you're starting, anything related to sales, I think sales is definitely one of those skills that needs to be learned like on the ground. So just actually getting into it, like for example, being a lawyer, I think doing a lot of negotiating was really helpful. But I also find a lot of benefit in, like, for example, I worked at the Cheesecake Factory when I was in high school and college, right? So I would work there in like the summers and the winter breaks in college. And I learned more working at the Cheesecake Factory than I think I did in like any legal job, because I learned so much about customer service. I learned about time management. Like I learned about their corporate structure and like all of what was going on. And I just soaked it up. So like all of your experiences, it doesn't have to be in like a corporate job. I think all your experiences can lead towards being helpful to starting a business.
Yes. And I have a. I actually just thought of a weird question. I'm gonna ask like a chicken or the egg question.
Yeah.
What comes first, the skills and the idea to start a business, or the desire to start a business?
I mean, you're probably working. I think what probably happens most often is that people get a job or they're working in some industry, and then that's when you have the idea, because that's essentially when you see like the hole in the market, right? That's, to me, the best businesses are built off of seeing holes in the market. And if you look at any of the most successful businesses or products or whatever, they not only solved a problem and like all of that kind of stuff for people, but they typically come from like there were already like things like it being offered. It's not like it was like so crazily innovating, but it made some like huge differentiating improvement to the market. And so I think that often comes from you being out there and working and garnering those skills, and then you're like, oh, I see this little gap, and I'm gonna go for it. That's what I'm gonna create.
Right. And then you talked about skills like copywriting and sales. And sales, you seem to
Yeah.
be huge. Like every
Yeah.
person I talk to talks about sales.
Yeah, you have to know how to sell things. I mean, it's hard not to, but I think like they kind of go hand in hand for me too, because with copywriting, like you learn about like persuasive copy techniques, and you learn about the different buying behavior. For example, like some people are like emotional buyers, and some people like myself like love seeing the list of features of something before they buy. Other people, that like turns them off and they skip over it, and you need to like completely speak to them on an emotional level. So like it's just that, like even learning that kind of like that sales psychology, which then translates over into your copywriting, for example, which you use from everything from like an Instagram caption to your website to if you start a newsletter, which I would highly recommend for everyone, as actually even like a great starting point to test out a concept. You need to know these things that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about this newsletter idea, because
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask whether you think we should, like, can we start something and develop the skills, like, as in the sense that, can we at least establish a newsletter and then still learn copywriting on the way, or does copywriting have to come first?
Absolutely. No, I want to make sure and that I'm clear too to people that like I am a big believer in getting started. I don't want you to wait, because otherwise you'll be waiting for the rest of your life. I have so much to improve, right? I have 47,000 people on my email list, and I have so much that I could improve. I just came out with my first book, right? And I'm still like, the other day I was looking up writing like retreats, like writing conferences that I could go to learn to be a better writer. And I have a published Big Five book. Like it's like this is gonna be an ongoing thing. So you can't be like, oh, once I get good at this thing, then I'll start. I think it's the process of starting that leads there. So I think a newsletter is a fantastic way. I think the thing I love about that is that you're building something a little more tangible than like a social media following. And often most entrepreneurs will say their number one thing I hear from entrepreneurs is, I wish I had started an email list earlier. Because once they get on social and they realize how exhausting they are, or that it changes over time and things don't work as well, or they're sick of the platforms, disappearing or whatever, that they're like, oh, I wish I would have started an email list so much earlier.
Look at me like I'm a dummy. What is actually a newsletter? Is it just like an Instagram, but just written? Like, I don't.
No, it's not a dumb question, because I literally remember the day that I Googled what is an email list, because I did not know. So when I was in college, didn't know. I would have been like, I think back then they still called them like email blasts, and I would have been like, what is this thing? Like, I don't know.
That's such a better name, by the way.
Yeah, I know. And people I think often associate it with like a lot of like big companies, like, getting an email from like The Gap just being like new sweaters, and like it's boring. There's like no actual content. So a newsletter is something that people receive by email. So it's something that people have to sign up for. Typically, free, although there are platforms like Substack now where they're like charging for newsletter subscriptions, usually for people who have like really good, valuable content and maybe even an audience. But essentially, you have people sign up for this email list, and then at some sort of regular interval, my preference is once a week, but at some sort of regular interval, you're sending them this massive email. So you write one email, but it goes to the entire email list. And it depends what your topic is about, right? So like some people, this is like more storytelling. Some people, it's like every email is like filled with tips. Other people, like yourself, for example, who have a podcast, they might send out an email to be like, hey, there's this new podcast episode this week. I had this lawyer turned entrepreneur Sam on. This is what we talked about. Click here to listen to our episode. So that's a great way to send more people to your podcast and like be what we call top of mind, like top of mind marketing, to consistently dropping into their inbox to be like, hey, new episode, here's what it's about. But the most important part about that, if you do it, is that you need to explain why they should go listen. So you're not just telling them like, this is a great episode. You're actually making it juicy, leaving a little bit of a hook. Actually, ChatGPT is really good at this, but you can tell it, you can train the model to say like, I want there to be a little bit of a cliffhanger of like something that, some reason why they should click and go listen to this episode. But yeah, that's what I would do.
I'm just actually debating why I'm not doing this. I feel like this is like
Should be doing it.
I feel like I have to do it. I don't know. There's like, I feel like there's no cons with doing it.
No, there's zero cons. It's great practice. It's great to like get the reps in to write these, and you'll get better at them. And everybody kind of makes the same mistake with these at first, especially when they're like promoting a podcast episode or a YouTube episode or something. They like make the same mistake, but it's really, really good to do. Often it then leads to like you writing independent emails to the list that are about maybe more of a topic. Like, for example, like you've brought up that a couple of the people that you've interviewed have talked about purpose, right? And so you could write an email to the email list that you had built of like, I've interviewed X number of entrepreneurs, and the number one thing I hear most consistently is purpose. And you could dive into that and write like an essay about it. I would read that email. That'd be fascinating. I would love to hear
so
like all the
interesting.
different little quotes, for example, like you could weave in. If I were you, I would then also link to all, like, so let's say you like said like on my podcast interview with Sam, like this is what she said. You would then be like, listen to my interview with Sam, and this is what Anne Laura said. And then you would link. And so it almost like be building like a little playlist too and looping back to previous interviews.
And for someone that, oh my God, first of all, I have to do this. Actually, that's a great idea. I'm not even saying this
Yeah,
for the
you
podcast.
should.
Like, I'm being selfish right now. I'm just like soaking in this
Yeah,
information
do
in.
it, yeah.
But let's say for the people who don't have like a podcast to connect with a newsletter, and let's say
Yeah.
the newsletter is their primary focus.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Is that the business technically?
It can be the thing for the moment. It can be the content, at least, like your primary content driver. If that's kind of like quote unquote all you have at this moment, what I recommend is that you sort of brand your newsletter. So like, for example, my newsletter is called Sam's Sidebar. That's the one that 47,000 people get every single Tuesday. And so it's like its own thing, right? So I will often market to be like, sign up for Sam's Sidebar, which we can like make sure you guys have the link so that if anybody wants to see how this is kind of done in real time. So I will say to people like, sign up for Sam's Sidebar. You get my weekly marketing strategies and a legal tip every single Tuesday. Just like drop your email here. And so then that's how we get people to sign up for it. So the email itself is full of value. The other massive way that this is done in our industry is with what we call a freebie, or some people will call an opt-in.
Okay.
So that's where you get a free resource in exchange for signing up for my email list. So I might say to you, for example, like I have a free like video training that teaches you the 5 steps to starting an online business. And so I will say, hey, here's my 5 steps to starting an online business legally video. Just drop your name and email here, and I'll email you a link to the video. So that's another thing I do. Over 350,000 people have taken that class from me. So that's been a great way for me to build my email list.
I like the idea that you don't need to get good at something and then start a business, but you need to make sure that there is something that provides value, and you need to train in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 100%. And especially with the amount of stuff that is available for free on social media, on things like YouTube, wherever. You have to position yourself to have a unique take, a unique voice, a hole in the market. Like there has to be something, but I truly believe that everybody has something interesting to offer. Like I don't also want anyone listening to be like, the thing I talk about is like already talked about or something like that. If you're truly being yourself, if you're integrating your personality into what you do, then I truly believe that there's space for you no matter what you want to do. I mean, look at me, right? I'm a lawyer. It's like there's nothing innovative or interesting about that. It's the fact that I've allowed my personality to come through. I've allowed some of my hobbies, like my personal life, to come through. The loss of my parents, I've talked about that in building my business. And so I have like kind of carved out this little niche for myself,
Yeah, and personal branding is huge. how do we do that? Because I think that's one of the first steps to actually attracting a customer is through getting your brand across and not just like, because once you start a newsletter, you need to find people to send it to, right?
Yeah.
So how do you
Yeah.
reach that clientele?
Yeah, that's where I think creating content and like practicing, like just that is where social media is such a brilliant tool, right? Because it's free, so you're not like paying to capture people's attention yet. So that is, I mean, that's where I started for several years of just doing that with like no running ads, no anything else. So just being on social, that's all about being yourself and actually showing up and like showing up consistently, showing different parts of your personality, leading with value, right? And being really consistent about like, hey, I'm here to talk about getting plastic out of the ocean, and like you better show up every day and talk about getting plastic out of the ocean and why is that important and why should I care and what are you out there doing? Show me you cleaning up, showing me you like working with companies who are doing that kind of stuff. Like you need to, if you want to be associated with something, then you have to be out there associating yourself with it.
Yes, and one of the biggest, yeah, I'll talk about myself. I started actually a side Instagram account where I was going to post like a daily thought, just something like that.
Yeah.
But then right away, I burnt out. Like that was, it's like in the graveyard right now. It's in the cemetery.
Yeah.
How can I avoid burnout?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that making sure you're focusing on quality over quantity, which is probably like the first thing I thought of when you said that about daily. I'm like, oh my God, do you have a daily thought versus worth sharing? Because I don't. So even like when I, so like even when I try to go on like Threads or something now, because I hate Twitter. But if I try to go on like Threads and share a thought, you know, I'm like, I'll sit there sometimes and be like, I don't have a thought. But then other days I have several. So I think one of this is maybe dropping this like expectation and really focusing on quality. The other big part of this conversation that helps with burnout is actually batching content. So when you feel good, when you feel inspired, when you have lots of ideas, I encourage batching as much as possible. So there are a couple of different ways I do this. One is like sometimes I'm like full of ideas. There's just certain times in like the week, the month, whatever, where I'm like, I can't stop the flow of ideas. It literally wakes me up. I think about business ideas all the time. I think about content ideas all the time. So during that phase, I will often sit down and like brain dump like out a master list of all these different ideas I have for content. So you can like batch in that way. For example, like if you started a newsletter, you could like batch a bunch of content ideas for that newsletter. The other thing is that then when you go to do things like podcasts, if you're doing solo and you're not relying on a guest, if you're doing a solo thing or a YouTube video or shooting reels or TikTok, then you can do like 5 or 6 of those at a time so that now you have, if you posted 1 or 2 of those a week, you have content for several weeks versus like having to produce that in the moment every day. I think that's one of the best ways to get out of it.
That's really good. And I also do think there is an element of quantity that's very important.
Yes, for reps purposes, I agree.
Exactly.
With that. Yeah.
One of my best mates, I had him on the podcast. He posts on Instagram every day. Like this guy since like October, I would say, has been posting on Instagram every day, and he was getting results. Like he was getting, let's say, 1,000, 2,000, 1,000 views back in like January, and like after you've been posting for 4 months, that can put you off. But he kept going, and finally this week he had 4 million views. Like he had a video that had 4 million, 3 million, 2 million. So I do think there's this idea that burnout can happen if you're not providing the right quality. But at the same time, if you're too focused on the results and you don't provide the quantity, that can cause burnout too.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I think like if you're trying to start a business or trying to get into like the content creation space, there is something to just creating a lot of stuff without expectation, much to your very good point. Like I think not having that, actually, I think it was Dr. Ann Lore who had this really good quote in her book, Tiny Experiments. It was about how you should focus on your output versus the like outcome goals. So a lot of people will be like, I want to like have 30,000 followers on Instagram instead of being like, I want to create 2 reels per week. Because that's what you can control. You can't really control how many views that you can get and you can't control how many followers, but you could say, I want my output to be 4 newsletters a month. Like that you can control, but right now you wouldn't be able to control how many subscribers you get.
And how did you dictate your output?
I think that for me, I always thought that consistency was really important. So then that allowed me, like I would kind of reverse engineer and be like, I think it's more important that you show up like for example, in your daily posting thing for Instagram, like if you would have reverse engineered that and been like, what do I realistically think that I could have done like 3 times a week, and then you could batch 6 at a time so that you could schedule them and they're like done. So when you get busy or you don't feel well, like you have something already done. So I think I try to think about like, first of all, it's dependent on the platform. Like YouTube, for example, you really don't even need to be posting more than once a week. Even that is considered to be like a lot nowadays. And because the videos are so much more highly produced. But I want to know like how much can I be consistent for the longest period of time? And so what do I think is realistic? Yeah.
And I think the idea of batching is actually really important because I'm going to speak from my perspective. I think my best ideas come at the most random times. It's literally like when I'm walking to class and I've seen a weird dog and I'm like, oh, that's a idea. But like the reason I think that Instagram didn't work, first of all, that Instagram was like the recipe for disaster. I was not even like batching. I was recording one every day and it would take me like, I would freak out if I couldn't record one. And that's why I think that fear just made me turn it off. But what I realized is I would find an idea for like a daily thought when I'm not thinking of daily thoughts.
Yes, exactly. That's why. So I'm a big proponent of like two different things. So one is like if you were out walking around and you did have those thoughts, I keep a note on my phone where I jot those ideas down all the time so that when I go to sit down to create content, I have a huge list of ideas. So that's one thing. The second thing is that if in the moment, like you were walking to class and you all of a sudden had that thought and you quick record that video on your phone, like the nice thing is like I keep a folder on my phone of those kinds of videos so that I have like ready to go videos to upload so that if I run out of ideas or I'm sick in a certain week, I have like a video I can just pop up and, keep up my consistency.
Yeah. And I think it's for me, and I think you can talk about it more. I think a misconception that people have when we're talking about, social media, you can just post on it. There is a bit of like resilience that's needed. And I really like this. I think it was a post that you actually posted the other day or week. It was I have the quote. It's sometimes to reach our goals, we have to make trade-offs.
Yes.
In your case, what are the trade-offs that you would exaggerate or emphasize?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the beginning, it was like the trade-off was like you think you go to start your own business because you have all this control and freedom and you're going to make all this money or whatever. And in the beginning, it was actually very isolating, very time consuming, not making a lot of money, like a lot of head down work. So it was like a trade-off for a long-term payoff. But even more recently, like when I got my book deal and I started writing my book, I was trying to do everything in my business like normal and write this like behemoth book, and it was so hard. So there was this trade-off of like, for example, I love podcasting. I have a podcast called On Your Terms and I love podcasting. It's like my favorite thing I get to do in my business. But in order to get my manuscript done, I decided to take the summer off of podcasting. So I went on hiatus for the summer, put my head down, went to the library like every day for like 8 hours and wrote the book. And so sometimes it just reminded me of like when we were little and your parents would say like you couldn't go out to play until you got your homework done. And I felt like that was like my version of play. And I had to like be like, I have a shit ton of homework right now, so I can't play. And so that's just how it was.
I think that's the biggest issue with social media as well. No one sees this work and they just think that everyone's just got this like everyone just thinks, oh, like she wrote a book, like that takes seconds, but no one sees the amount of work it takes.
That's why I documented it, to be honest.
Exactly.
I wanted to show people what it was like. Yeah.
And I think that's one of my favorite parts about creators like you is because like in the nicest way, it's no bullshit. Like I don't need to actually look at you and go, oh, like she's an overnight success. I appreciate that you talk about what you do is sometimes hard to emulate or recreate.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
And I think that's needed. No, you're welcome. Very welcome.
Yeah.
Let's go back to this idea of your business won't fix your life. I feel like that's a really good one to stand out, right?
Yeah, for sure. I would encourage everybody to like not put that amount of pressure on it, especially on a young business. Like if you're just starting something, that's like going on your first date and being like, we're getting married, right? Like it's just a lot. Most people be like freaked out and be like, I'm good. I'm going to back off. It's a lot to put on a young business. So kind of like see where it goes, stay open to the experience. Yeah.
And one of my favorite things that I do at the end of each episode is because I've got literally an expert right in my screen in front of me is to ask, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think based on our conversation, I'm gonna like tailor it, because the best piece of advice related to what we've talked about was that Sarah Faye, who isn't she a writing professor at NYU? I feel like she might. No, she's at Northwestern. She's a writing professor at Northwestern. Sorry.
I was like freaking out. I was like, oh God, if I don't know, it's embarrassing.
No, I was like, wait, I think, no, it's another purple school. That's why it got mixed up in my head. No, so she's at Northwestern, but she gave this great tip about when you're getting started creating content. So whether you're writing a newsletter, recording YouTube videos, starting a Substack, whatever, to write like a certain number of them, to always like write before the thing is going to be published, or create another video before the current one's going to be published, because then you don't get in your own way to say, oh, my video on YouTube didn't go that great, so now I'm not creating the next one. So like you already have it in the bank, it's already scheduled, and so you're more like we've talked about, getting in the habit of not expecting these like results and putting so much pressure on it, and just treating it more like I'm just practicing, I'm learning how to express myself, like I'm creating this art or content or whatever, and not doing it, and then not allowing the results or lack thereof to actually like impact the output.
It's like forcing yourself to not be result reliant.
Exactly. And I think it's like dummy proof too, that I've done this, and in the times when I've forgotten and I like wrote a Substack article, for example, and then it didn't go anywhere, and I was like, wow, I really thought that was gonna land, and like I thought all these people were gonna do, and nothing did it, then I didn't write the next week's, like even though I wanted to, because I let that get too much in my head and let the results impact the output.
So start batching, ladies and gentlemen. We need to get more batching going on. And Sam, it's been an absolute honor. What's next, and where can we get your lovely book?
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. So you can get my book at samvanderwielen.com/book, or anywhere that bookstores that books are sold. So you can go to Barnes & Noble, Target, Amazon, Bookshop, wherever you like. It's called When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy. Make sure that you come over and listen to my podcast on your terms, because I talk a lot about how to start an online business. And then say hi to me on Instagram at Sam Vander Wielen.
Amazing. And we're super excited. April 15th, ladies and gentlemen, keep in track.